Coming up on today's show, I want to run through a perfect offseason plan for the Atlanta Falcons now that we have a pretty good start into the offseason for the Dirty Birds. But first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel lately. We just crossed 32,000 subscribers. We are marching our way to 33K and then chipping our way to 40,000. So go ahead, scroll on down, click the subscribe button for free daily Falcons content. Now, I think it's important to let you guys know that I've done this video before. This is actually my third off-season plan for the Falcons, and I think it's important to know if your host has anything between his ears. So, let's look at my off-season plan from last year, where I had step 1, draft Jaden Daniels 8. Obviously, that was a little bit ambitious, but in January, wasn't really clear if he'd be a slam dunk to go number 2. Step 2 was sign T. Higgins. Unfortunately, the Bengals brought him back, but I think we can all agree that would have been a nice move. Step 3, sign Jonathan Gennard. That would have been fantastic. He had a phenomenal season for the Texans. It still is. Step 4, trade for Jonathan Allen. Would have been nice to add some more pass rushers, don't you think? And step 5, extend A.J. Terrell, something they did do before the season started. And then my first perfect offseason plan, I think you guys might laugh at step 1, it was hire Brian Flores as defensive coordinator. That would have been a very nice hire, don't you think? Step 2 was franchise tag Caleb McGarry. Instead, they gave him a 3-year contract, which wasn't an overpay, but right now I'm wondering what the future is with lefty Michael Penix gearing up to be the starter next year. Signed Deron Payne. That would have been nice for the interior. Didn't happen. Prep Desmond Ridder. Didn't do that well enough. And then step 5 was draft defensive pick number 8. How about Bijan Robinson? I think that one worked out pretty well. So with that being said, now let's look at my 2025 perfect offseason, starting with step number 1, hire Dennis Allen. Falcons need a new defensive coordinator after firing Jimmy Lake, and I think Dennis Allen would be a very good candidate to look into. Let's just look at the Saints' points allowed, as Allen's been the head coach for the last few years, or was the head coach the last few years, and the defensive coordinator before that. Year 1, it was rocky. And that's usually the case for first-time head coaches and coordinators. But look at the vast improvement. 32nd to 31st, all the way to 10th. Then they can hang out that 10, 14, 13, and then they have that dominant stretch. 2020, 5th. 2021, 4th. 2022, 9th. 2023, 8th. 4 straight seasons top 10 in scoring defense for New Orleans. No one would have believed that before Dennis Allen got there. They were one of the worst defenses in football. The way to measure it is, did anyone ever pick the Saints defense in fantasy football in like 2013? No, they were never drafted because there was nothing positive about that New Orleans defense. You can thank Dennis Allen, if you're a Saints fan, which I doubt you are, for that turnaround. So I really admired and respected what he was able to do with that New Orleans defense with a medium-ish budget. They used some premium draft picks on defensive players. Marshawn Lattimore, he was a 11th overall pick. Marcus Davenport was 14, 15, somewhere in that range. So they used some quality draft picks on defensive players. But did they ever go out and sign some big-name blockbuster defensive player? Not really. They never spent huge money on defense. So despite not having a plethora of cash to spend on free agents, Dennis Allen made a very good defense, and I think he could do a very good job with the Falcons defense. Step 2, this one's some wishful thinking, trade Kirk Cousins. I think that is the, can we all agree, optimal outcome for the entire Kirk Cousins sequence going on here. I know some people want to bring him back as a backup quarterback. The Falcons themselves have talked about bringing him back as a backup quarterback. I think that's just coach speak to let everyone know we want to bring him back. So if you want him, you're going to have to pry him away from us and make us a great offer, knowing that's not going to happen. But I believe ultimately it's just time to rip the Band-Aid off. I've seen a lot of comments in the comment section talking about if you get rid of Kirk Cousins, you have to find a new backup quarterback. Okay, what's the problem? I mean, you want to bring back the guy that you signed and then replaced 14 weeks into the season? And no one thinks that might be a little bit awkward for all parties involved? I look at the Denver Broncos this season, who had a ton of success despite being number 1 in dead money, not having a second-round draft pick, and they went 10-7 and made the playoffs. And you know what they did? They bit the bullet. They moved on from Russell Wilson when they could have brought him back to be Bo Nix's backup, not have to go out and find a different backup quarterback. But ultimately, do you think Bo Nix would have been as successful this year if he had Russell Wilson kind of breathing down his neck? Always somewhat trying to reclaim his starting job when that's not the backup's job in most cases. The backup is there to be the backup, right? I love to see competition, but in some situations, you don't need that competition. You don't bring a backup for Tom Brady because Tom Brady needs to be pushed a little bit. Not saying Penix is Tom Brady, but saying that not every situation calls for a backup where he has to push the starter. I don't need Michael Penix to be pushed for the starting role. So I would like to see a backup come in that can help mentor and develop and be something that Penix can lean on. Not someone that Penix is like, I feel a little awkward going to Kirk with advice or for questions because the whole thing's been very uncomfortable since I replaced him as the starter. So, yeah, I feel like it would be like if husband and wife get divorced, wife remarries, does the new husband call the ex-husband for advice on how to hang out or deal with the wife when she's having a meltdown? Probably not. So let's move on from Kirk Cousins altogether. And also, if you could trade him, which is unlikely, but this is supposed to be a perfect offseason, so live with me a little bit in fantasy land. You get to add to your draft capital. You're not going to get much. You're going to get a 7th or 6th round draft pick. It's probably going to be you give Kirk Cousins in the 7th, and they get you give Kirk Cousins in the 7th, and they get a 6th round draft pick. So, or I get that twisted all around, but you get the gist of it. So ultimately, if you can just get something for Cousins, that would be nice. All right, before we move on to the next few steps of my perfect offseason plan, make sure you check out our sponsor today, Game Time. Game Time has an awesome feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One thing I love about Game Time is their all-in pricing option. When you toggle this feature, it'll show you the total upfront cost with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, they offer the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Getting back to our perfect offseason, step 3 is sign cornerback Asante Samuel. Atlanta needs to add to their cornerback room. They have a lot of free agents, and I think Samuel would be an awesome target for the Falcons. For one, he's had a really strong career up until this season when he got injured. He showed some great availability in the first few seasons, playing every single game in 2022 and 2023. So the best ability is availability, and for much of his career, he has been available. Plus, 3 straight seasons of 2 interceptions. So some great ball skills altogether. But look at the Falcons cornerback room with me. Mike Hughes, free agent. D. Alford's going to be like a restricted free agent. He's going to come back. But Kevin King, Antonio Hamilton, all free agents. So the only surefire thing coming back is A.J. Terrell, although I expect D. Alford to come back, along with Clark Phillips, but he's not in a starting role. So having said all that, I think Asante Samuel would be a really good fit on Atlanta's defense because of what his background is with the Chargers. Let's look at the coverage rates for the Falcons and the Chargers in 2024. Atlanta, big zone defense. 4th in the NFL, a little over 3/4 of the time. You know who bested them? The Chargers, doing it 77.8% of the time, 2nd most in the league. This was a big change. Under Ryan Nielsen, the Falcons were a much more man-to-man defense. Under Raheem Morris, much more of a zone defense. In Raheem Morris's first offseason as the Falcons head coach, there's only so much you can change and so much you can do. And I think in this offseason, he's going to start bringing in guys who are better schematic fits to what he wants to do defensively. He wants to run a zone defense? Go get someone who's only known zone defense. A.J. Terrell at times really struggled in the transition from man to zone. So I think bringing in someone who's got that familiarity, has that skill set of a zone background like Samuel, plus awesome name, awesome family lineage. So that checks that box for sure. I'm all in on Asante Samuel in free agency. I want to know from you, though, should the Falcons sign a cornerback? Do you feel like this is a big enough need to address, or are you comfortable with A.J. Terrell, Clark Phillips, D. Alford as your 3 starters? Then you find cheaper options as the backups. Pros and cons to both. Let me know what you think, yes or no. Moving on to step number 4. Draft James Pearce Jr. I've gone back and forth. In my mock draft a week ago, I had the Falcons not going with James Pearce Jr., but ultimately, I'm going to stick with this. I'm sure this will change, or I'm not sure of it, but the draft can be fluid as we learn where guys are expected to go and things like that. But as of right now, I'm going to stick my foot in the ground and say, let's go with James Pearce out of Tennessee at pick number 15. There's a lot to like out of him. I mean, incredibly productive sophomore season, 10 sacks, 14 and a half tackles for loss. Junior year, not as productive, but I believe there is some fair reasoning to it. For one, where do most college pass rushers collect most of their, or where do most college pass rushers collect a lot of their sacks from? Usually it's when they are playing a lesser opponent in September, right? And they get to pick on the offensive line from whatever MAC school they paid $1 million to come down to the Southeast, or when they play the School of Deaf and Blind in November. James Pearce in the first month of the season hardly played. Tennessee was rolling opponents early on, and Pearce was playing the first half of games, so he didn't really have all 4 quarters to accumulate a bunch of stats. Had he played all 4 quarters in the first 3-4 weeks of the season, we'd probably see more than 7.5 sacks. So I think that's a fair justification with a slight little bias from a Tennessee grad right here. On top of that, though, there's a lot to like about James Pearce. He is lengthy. He's got good size. The weight could be better, a little under 250 pounds, but altogether, there is a lot to like here. And when I look at the draft targets for the Falcons at 15, a couple of names really jump to the top of the list. Pearce, Michael Williams, who I'm kind of in between him and Pearce on, Nick Scorton, Benjamin Morris, and then this ECU cornerback, Chevron Revel. I'm sure I'm going to learn that name a lot more over the next couple of weeks, but he's a fun target to keep an eye on. But I think 3 pass rushers and 2 corners is a good starting point for Atlanta at pick number 15. So let me know who you want to see the Falcons select with that 15th overall draft pick. Get down to the comment section, drop a name that you want to hear Commissioner Roger Goodell read in April. So after going with James Pearce in round number 1, my 5th and final step to a perfect offseason is re-sign Drew Dalman. I think the Falcons should bring back their center. Maybe a bit pricey, might be a bit expensive, but ultimately, I think it's a worthy investment. He has been one of the best centers in football the last couple of years. Pro Football Focus ranked him 5th and then 3rd and 14th from 2022 to 2024, years he was a full-time starter for the Falcons. He has been so dominant in the middle of that offensive line, pairing nicely with Matthew Bergeron and Chris Lindstrom. So it all really comes down to one thing: the money. Here's the top 5 highest paid centers in football. Where's Dalman going to land? I don't think he's going to get on. That sounded weird. I don't think he's going to make more than Creed Humphrey. Humphrey's a great center. Now, we should know by now that if you're the second highest paid center, it doesn't mean you're the second best center, because contracts go up as the salary cap goes up. My guess is, though, if he's not going to be the highest paid center, he's definitely going to be the second highest paid center. So here's my contract offer to Drew Dalman. 4 years, $64 million. It's an average of $16 million a season, and that makes him the second highest paid center. If he's a little bit unhappy about not making the same or more than Creed Humphrey, what we can do is we can make $50 million of that $64 million guaranteed. That's basically a 3-year, $50 million contract, which comes out to about $16-ish million a season. So a big 3-year commitment, but I think he's worth it. So to recap, here is my perfect offseason plan for the Falcons. Hire Dennis Allen to run the defense. Try and trade Kirk Cousins. Probably not going to find a trade suitor, but maybe. And if not, honestly, release him. Move on. I understand that you don't gain anything from a salary cap perspective, but I do believe there is a valuable addition to the locker room, addition to moving on and not having the elephant in the room of another season with Kirk Cousins breathing down Michael Penix's neck. Step 3, sign Asante Samuel Jr. I think Atlanta secondary is going to need some new faces to it, and Asante Samuel comes over with a lot of familiarity with the type of defense the Falcons run, so it would be a good plug and play. Step 4, draft James Pearce. This one's always going to be fluid. Things change as we get closer to the draft in some people's eyes. The combine will influence some people's opinions, but right now, I'm thinking James Pearce is a great play at 15. And then step 5 is bring back your starting center, Drew Dalman. So grade my perfect offseason plan for me. A, B, C, D, or F. I would have been the GM of the year last year if I was able to get Jaden Daniels at 8 and T. Higgins in free agency. So a little ambitious, but it's supposed to be a perfect offseason. So why not live a little bit in fantasy land? So let me know what grade you have for me down below in the comment section. I'd probably give myself a B+. B+. I don't know if James Pearce is truly going to be able to solve all of your pass rushing woes, but when you're picking 15, you can't have that guarantee. Before we get on out of here, I just want to give a shout out to some of you who have been commenting on our recent videos. So we'll do this throughout the off season a little bit here, but get some names on screen. So let's pick a random commenter and give a little 2-clap action to. So we've got 6 people who were in our last comment section. Spin those wheels. Spin that name. Spin that wheel. I'm all over the place. Who do we got? We've got Randy Bobandy. Let's go. Randy, thank you so much for tuning in, for commenting on yesterday's video. Everyone, 2 claps for Randy. 1, 2. All right.
Let's go, Randy.
We'll see you guys tomorrow with some more Falcons news and rumors. Thanks for tuning in.